It's Monday, and that so happens to be the day that I like to talk about monsters. Hello, and welcome to Monster Mondays. I am Geoff Arbuckle, co-host of the podcast Film Seizure, that you can catch each Wednesday at filmseizure.com or at a number of podcast providers online. Let's return to the world of Ultra Q and our intrepid heroes who often find themselves right smack dab in the middle of some monster business. Aviation partners Jun Manjomi and Ippei Tagawa, and reporter for the Daily News, Yuriko Edogawa. We're going to be looking at 3 more episodes this week, and we kick things off with episode 12, the pleasant-sounding I Saw a Bird. Then I'll discuss episode 13 and one of the more fun-looking monsters of the whole series in the episode Garadama. And finally, I'll discuss episode 14, Tokyo Ice Age, and for the first time ever, the return of a monster previously seen in the series. But let's dive right in and enter this world of creatures and concepts that would shatter our perception of safety and sanity. In I Saw a Bird, an employee making his late night rounds at a zoo starts to notice that all the animals are starting to act a little crazy. And when he happens to look up, he sees a dark shape flying overhead that attacks him. When the police investigate the next morning, they find all the cages have been broken open and all the animals of this menagerie are missing. The only thing left behind is that late night employee who says only, "I saw a bird." Elsewhere, in a small seaside village, a strange ship arrives in the harbor, drifting like a ghost ship. And the ship looks like an old ship from Europe that isn't just out of place, but turns out to be nearly 1,000 years out of time. As Jun, Ippei, and Yuri investigate, the ship begins rocking and suddenly crumples and sinks into the sea, almost like it melted. The only 2 things our heroes take from the boat are the logbook written in a language they can't quite decipher. They say it's either Italian or Greek, and a small white bird. But as the ship sank, the bird flew away and into the small boat of a boy from that seaside village who took that boat to go on his own adventure. The boy befriends the white bird, which we learn is actually not what it seems. You see, that small white bird is a prehistoric creature called Larugus, a mystery solved through the study of that logbook that Jun, Ippei, and Yuri took to Professor Ichinotani. But how did Larugus get to the present when it was the prehistoric and likely extinct? Well, that boat was indeed from what they say 998 years ago. Jun ponders if the boat traveled through time through a portal into the 4th dimension. And at first that seems preposterous, but the last time a bird matching the description of a Larugus was spotted was in the mid-10th century, roughly the same age as that book and the logbook's information within. When the boy returns home to his village with the bird, flocks of chickens begin to go missing. Suspecting the bird is to blame, it is captured, but it suddenly grows gigantic, busting out of the cage it was put in and causes some pretty bad damage to the village before flying away as the little boy bids it farewell, both tearfully, but also in some small ways happily. In Garadama, a group of kids find a meteorite. They take it to their school, and one of the teachers learns how one boy saw it kind of fall from the sky, and it turns out to be very light. The boy who found it can easily lift this meteorite entirely over his head like it's nothing. Eventually, this lands in the care of our Professor Ichinotani, who examines it further and learns it's made from tilsonite, and it's later discovered to be sending out some really strong radio waves. Now, they do basically explain that tilsonite was recently discovered in the Middle East. They go into a little bit about how it seems to be a compound that's not of this earth. But those radio waves seem to kind of be messing with the ionosphere of the planet. It interrupts radio broadcast and all of that stuff, and it seems to be calling to something. But I love this professor character. I mean, he basically knows everything about everything. Just in the previous episode, he's translating a ship's log from either Italian or Greek. He knows about the prehistoric bird. He knows all about the space rock that crashed to Earth and knows that it's made, what it's made of, and it might be even alien in origin. He's like the smartest person on the planet. And I also like that the kids have called the meteorite a Garadama, and it's just universally accepted to be this phenomenon's name. But as Ishinotani, Jun, and Ippei investigate the site of the Garadama's landing, another comes crashing down, and this one is much, much larger and breaks the dam near the village that these kids live in. Now, the broken dam is devastating to the area around this river, and what emerges from the large Garadama is even more devastating. A creature they call a Garamon. As Garamon stomps around the countryside near the broken dam, Ishinotani suggests that Garamon was sent by an alien race with a far more superior intellect than humanity. In fact, it might have just been fired at us from that other society. But meanwhile, Jun has called Yuri to go to the professor's lab and to help there. And she starts seeing a connection between the original Garadama and the radio waves. As more study of the Garadama and observation of Garamon is completed, she postulates the first Garadama that crash-landed is the robotic brain that controls Garamon. And it reacts to things that the lab workers do to it. When they tried to cut into it, Garadama was incapacitated and was kind of jerking around on the ground and spinning around like it didn't know what it was doing. When they cover the Garadama with a radio wave blocking structure, Garamon collapses and becomes inert. Our spooky narrator says that this is not the end of the potential invasion from whoever sent this creature, and that's the end of the episode. They cover the Garadama, and Garamon just falls over, essentially dead. But now we move to our third episode for this week, Tokyo Ice Age. Now, the episode begins at a bustling airport in Tokyo. It's summertime, and all the workers at the airport are planning for fun outdoor business when they have time off. However, not all is calm. An airplane coming in for a landing suddenly states that they can't move the flaps on the wings. And surprisingly, the airplane stops in midair before it explodes and falls directly to the tarmac. Now, soon, the airport is covered in ice and from a sudden freezing cold wave that has covered the area. As if a sudden cold front in the middle of summer isn't enough, a black cloud passes by and over Tokyo. And what's inside the cloud is the monster Pagula. Now, Pagula has returned during his migration from the South to North Poles. The first time we saw him, he was at one of the poles and was creating some havoc there. Now, he's tired and needs to rest. And he's not only bringing cold, but he's also bringing destruction to Tokyo. He stomps through the city while blowing his freeze breath all over the place. Now, a boy who has crossed paths with Yuri is trying to locate his father, and she takes up his plight thinking, oh, this is going to be a great story for her to write that will be read all over the world. But in the midst of this deep freeze and deep snow, this kid's father is actually at Jun and Ippei's transportation business. They just so happen to find him passed out from drinking too much in one of the planes. He wanted to steal it to get away with some diamonds that he had stolen previously. And it's kind of interesting because seemingly this kid's dad, who was this passed out drunk who's carrying with him large diamonds and a gun and is potentially dangerous to our two heroes, he saved their lives. If they'd have flown off to try to figure out what was going on with this cold front, they likely would have suffered the same fate as the airplane at the airport. So how's about that? But after the kid tells his father, the guy at the transportation company, to save the, quote, reporter lady, he takes one of Jun's planes and asks a couple of his associates to load the plane with explosives. He then flies off for Pagula and sacrifices himself kamikaze style by flying his plane full of explosives right into the monster's mouth, driving him off and away from Tokyo. And by the way, this would be the last time Pagula, at least in what I would assume is this continuity, would appear. He shows up later in later Ultra series, but the kid's dad sacrificed and redeemed himself. And while that kid does have a happy goodbye to Yuri at the end of the episode, it ends with him on the train heading home with a lot of solemn reflection covering his face. Let's talk about 3 things I like about these episodes. As is the case when covering multiple episodes of Ultra Q, I'm going to assign 1 like per episode. For I Saw a Bird, I really like the mystery and the seemingly unresolved nature surrounding this episode. It's unresolved in one way because, well, the bird flies away and not defeated or neutralized as we typically see. Larugus is just going to be part of this world now, and it will eat. Now, luckily, it doesn't seem too interested in eating people, but still. I mean, the more interesting element, though, is the ship that is out of time. That's how the bird got to 1966. But is it really a ship that time traveled, or is it a ship that has been left adrift for 1,000 years, basically? There are arguments for both sides, right? I mean, for one, it seems pretty unlikely the ship went undetected for 1,000 years, even afloat in the vast ocean. So, yeah, it could have somehow, like through, I don't know, the Bermuda Triangle or something, found a portal that transported it from the 10th century to the 20th century. But then again, when June and Yuri were poking around the boat, everything inside was covered with quite thick dust. So even if it did travel through time, it still was empty and adrift for a long time already. So there's no real explanation offered of the origin of the ship other than it's just old. And there's kind of a creepy factor to that. That means it's possible people will travel through time unexpectedly, or a whole bunch of zoos and farms are going to have to deal with missing animals as Larugus needs to feed. I guess they'll just have to leave that for Ultraman to deal with someday, I guess. But interestingly, Larugus would not show up again until Shin Ultraman in 2022. So it's kind of one of those things that, yeah, it's part of the world now, but it doesn't really end up becoming a major problem for people. But no, I just like the idea that there is kind of an unresolved element to this episode. Not only is the bird itself unresolved, but how it got there is unresolved. And how it got there being unresolved is a lot more creepy and a lot more concerning than the fact that he's still going to be in the world. But another interesting note, this episode, I Saw a Bird, is actually often considered a highlight in the Ultra Q series when looking at the young boy's desire to have a free life, to live freely, to just not being, not be held down by what's expected of him from the village he's from. And it's have his emotional attachment to this bird, which birds are often seen as something that are the most free of all animals. We wax poetic about that as people all the time. I mean, I think it's why he quickly forms the attachment to the bird and is somewhat happy when the bird escapes and regains its freedom, while also initially shouting kind of mournfully to have Larugus take him with him as he escapes. But it's a very interesting and a very well written episode that does have a lot of emotion to it. But for Garadama, I mean, come on, man. It's the creature Garamon itself that I like. That's my second like here. That's the like for that episode. Garamon is the most recognizable of all the Ultra Q creatures, and one that has appeared in later series as well as a monster with a whole bunch of merchandise. I mean, hell, even I have a Garamon, and I got it before I even saw this episode. Garamon is really kind of a difficult thing to describe if you've never seen it. While Ultra Q is black and white, we'd later learn that this thing is mostly red. It looks kind of like a pile of leaves. Like the shape of, like, I don't know if it's the fur or the scales on them, look like leaves that make up his main body. But it also has these downward hanging hands with long Nosferatu-like fingers. He also has these weird segmented legs that he used to kind of like scoot and hop around. But his most endearing feature absolutely is his face. More accurately, his giant mouth and his kind of puffy yellow lips. I mean, he's so ugly, he's adorable. But check this out. He's not really a monster. He's a giant robot. When he scoots around and hops and so forth, when he's moving, there are sounds of like gears and jangling metal that is heard. If you'd have told me before seeing this episode and just looking at this thing that he was a robot, I would have told you, well, I would have probably have said that makes sense, because kaiju, especially in the world of the Ultra series, are kind of crazy sometimes. But that said, I wouldn't have necessarily expected that. But I do love this thing. I mean, he looks kind of sad, but also angry, and his hands, the way he carries them around, I mean, makes me think of Roger from American Dad. It's such a weird but endearing design for a monster. But in an episode that ends incredibly anticlimactic, at least Garamon became something of a superstar. Now, thirdly, for Tokyo Ice Age, as cool, no pun intended, as it is that this is the first time we've seen a returning monster in Ultra Q, it's not my like for this episode. The whole return of Pagula and the cold freeze he brings with it, that's not really the primary story here. Sure, it takes up most of the time of the episode, but June and Ippei are basically stuck at their airstrip because of the cold. They aren't really there directly to do much with Pagula. Yuri kind of has the most to do here. The main story here is this boy that she finds in Tokyo who says that his father, a Zero pilot in World War II, supposedly went off to do a thing and hasn't returned. And that was 6 months ago. Yes, it connects to the drunk that's found passed out in one of June's planes. But her desire to write this story that she thinks will become world famous about a kid trying to find his war hero father after being separated for months is really the main thing about this story. Like I said with I Saw a Bird, Ultra Q could show it could be about more than whatever monster of the week there was. There's still a sense of normal everyday stuff that just kind of ends up intersecting with the more fantastical monster stuff. There's something of a heart to the idea that a boy wants freedom, like in I Saw a Bird, or a kid in this episode, Tokyo Ice Age, to be reunited with his father, who has ostensibly left this kid to care for himself while he was off doing what we would later find out is potentially stealing or smuggling diamonds. It's nothing the professor or our main cast determines that needs to be done to basically defeat Pagula. It's this kid's father who, upon seeing his son, returns to his former heroic self to drive the monster away for good. It's a much more human story here that supersedes the return of a popular Ultra Series creature for the first time. But anyway, that wraps up this week's Monster Mondays. You can catch new episodes of Monster Mondays each Monday at filmseizure.com. Don't forget to follow Film Seizure at Facebook, Threads, Instagram, and Blue Sky. You can also subscribe to Film Seizure to get both the Film Seizure Podcast on Wednesdays and Monster Mondays at your favorite podcast providers. And we also upload that stuff to YouTube. You can also check out my website, bmovieenema.com, to read new review articles every Friday morning. Next time, we return to Kolchak the Night Stalker with the episodes The Devil's Platform and Bad Medicine. Until next week, stay spooky.